3, 2, 1, here we go. Yep, that's a Busch Light. I usually don't drink that much, but today it sounded delicious while I'm podcasting with you. So I know it's Monday morning and it's the Monday after the Super Bowl, so you're probably hanging a little bit, especially if you stayed up. I did not make the entire game. I'm an old soul, and I really just didn't care a ton about the teams that were playing in it. So my happy ass was in bed way before the game was over. Well, not way before the game was over, but usually I go to bed about 9 o'clock. So, anywho, this is episode 179 of the Last Breath Huntcast. Thank you for tuning in. Today is kind of a one that's off the wall, hanging in left field. It's a spring cleanup. So I'm going to bullshit with you guys about a hodgepodge of stuff, let you know on what's coming up, and then give you some 411 on the bobcat that I killed. And probably not in that order. So really quick here to knock out the sponsors. We want to thank Badlands Gear for being a sponsor of this podcast. Really appreciate your support. Looking forward to hopefully growing and evolving in this next season. Now, guys, I know I've been getting messages almost daily about the code. I am trying to do it as politely as possible without getting overstepping my bounds, I should say, about, hey, we need this new code to get renewed and activated. I've got dozens of guys who literally are waiting to use it. So I'm sorry for the delay. I promise you that I'm doing it as tactful as possible without rubbing people the wrong way. Next is Dark Night Outdoors. If you are thinking about getting a thermal, call Jamie, call Bill. New products from the SHOT Show are landing into their shop daily. You're also going to be getting year-end discounts and specials. Make sure you talk to them about a cash discount. And they always work around a couple different ways to make sure that you get the best deal hands down. Moultrie Mobile is another sponsor of our podcast. Mark Olis, if you're listening, thank you, buddy, for everything you do for us. Looking forward to running these new Edge Pros this year and really putting that app to work. And last but not least by a long shot is Tompkins Taxidermy. Actually, Michael's on vacation this week. He's on a hunt in Oklahoma. So I'm looking forward to see how that goes down there with his buddies. Hopefully he'll be giving me updates as that happens. But again, Mike, good luck. And Wayne is going to be holding down the fort all by himself. He's got some really cool projects that, like I said last time, he's sending out the door. He's got a grizzly that I'm going to go in there and take some photos of before his customer picks up. And he's got a bobcat that he's working on, and he's knocking out shoulder mounts daily. So if you're in the area and you want to just have some badass taxidermy, I would check them out. Oh, and also, by the way, Tompkins is now offering soft tanning. So if you have any furs from the season that you'd like to get soft tanned, they're offering that service. It's pretty economical when you sit down and look at things, and they look really nice too. And the lead time is pretty quick, considering that most tanneries like USA Fox and some other places are in upwards of 6 months, unless you want to pay an expedited fee. But I've got a couple furs that I have hanging up in my shed, and they're nostalgic, but they're also kind of nice. And sometimes you just don't realize how soft these animals are that you hunt and harvest. But anyway, let's get into the podcast, episode 179. So I'm going to start off with the bobcat that I killed this past weekend. My wife and I were wanting to do like an early Valentine's getaway, just kind of have some fun. And I have some clients that have property down in Missouri. And they extended this invitation to go down there and hunt. And they're like, yeah, we have tons of coyotes, and we have some cattle ground, and we have some timber ground in northern Missouri that we've seen bobcats all the time. Like, we don't really hunt them. We don't care. They're deer hunters. And they do some turkey hunting too, but they gave us free rein. So we went down there and we spent the night. And I'll be darned if I didn't get up on Saturday morning and my first stand. And I'm going to be the first one to admit, like, Logan and I went out. We stayed in Columbia, Missouri, which is kind of in the middle of the state. Didn't realize how much of a college town that was. We stayed in the Tiger Hotel, super bougie, way too nice for us. But again, I let my wife kind of pick it out because I was having my cake and eat it too. I was checking a couple boxes, going hunting and doing something with Logan. And so we stayed there, and then we went to the Addison for dinner, which is it wasn't crazy expensive or anything too over the top, but the dinner was nice, and we like I said we just stayed up too late and had fun. So that morning, I didn't really make my first call until like 7 o'clock, I'd say, and I brought my tried and true 204 Ruger. I've had that gun forever. In fact, it's the first rifle that I ever bought when I was 18. I got tired of literally hunting coyotes with my shotgun. And I told my dad, I'm like, I'm buying a gun. And I went to Farm King in Galesburg and I bought this Savage 110 bolt action and 204 Ruger. And I didn't know anything about any of the rounds. I just remember I asked the guy behind the case and I said, hey, I want a coyote gun. What do you have? He listed off his options and he's like, 204 is a good round. And lo and behold, I absolutely love that cartridge and I love that firearm. And it's killed a ton of stuff for me, a ton of coyotes. And now it's got a bobcat on its under its belt too. And so I'm shooting a 32 grain VMAX bullet that I load, and I'm actually using CFE 223 powder. It's the same powder that I use for my 224 Valkyrie, and I've got that thing dialed in, and it's shooting super flat, super fast. And the number one best thing about that gun is that it is such a small bullet, and it has so much ass behind it that it almost never exit. Now, don't get me wrong, I've hit some coyotes where it'll maybe shrapnel down the side or just decides that it wants to make a big hole, but those are very, very, very far and then few and in between. So this bobcat that I shot with that 204 Ruger, I'll get to the story here in a bit, but man, his fur is perfect. That bullet did exactly what could have ever wanted it to do. So anyway, using my 204, loved that gun. Actually, I had Jeremy Sides from Eclipse coated a little while ago because like I said, I bought it a long time ago and I had it wrapped in that camouflage stuff. And shame on me, I did it when I was in high school. And I'm glad I did because this was when a lot of your rifles were blued, had a blued barrel, not like a matte Cerakote finish or a nitride finish. And I had a shimmer and a shine, and I just did not like that when I was hunting. Well, unfortunately, a byproduct of that, especially hunting in the winter and the late fall, is that it had moisture got under there, and it wasn't rusted terribly, but it had some surface rust. And I'm like, man, I need to save this gun. And as much as I do like an old school look of like a blued barrel, just in my opinion, I feel like that looks best on like a shotgun with a nice wood grain stock. And so this one has a synthetic stock with aluminum bedding, so it's very stiff and rigid. It's got, everything that you'd want, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, had Jeremy coat it. Looks awesome. Actually, there's pictures of it on my Instagram. He did like 7 colors on this camo. He knocked it out of the park. And got set up, had the wind right, and honestly, I wasn't even expecting to shoot a bobcat. I'd bought my non-resident license, my fur bearer's license, and it's good for an entire year, which is nice because I bought it after the new year. And I got set up. I was just sitting on my butt, and actually, I used these. It's a type of chair that you use for like coyote hunting or turkey hunting, and it sits really close to the ground. It's pretty comfortable. And I have a bipod attached to the bottom of it, and got set up. And so the sun was kind of coming up on my left, so it wasn't directly in my eyes, and I was tucked into a little bit of a shade next to some trees, and I could see probably 280 yards at the longest point that I could realistically shoot. And I could see some other cattle pastures across the gravel road a long ways away. So I got set up and I was thinking about, okay, should I howl or should I not? And I didn't howl. I started off with doing some cottontail distress and I let that play out for 2 or 3 times and I turned it off and let it get quiet. And I was thinking, okay, I wonder if maybe I access it wrong. It's first time hunting in here, and I walked in, I don't know, probably 450-ish yards. There was a hard frost on Saturday morning, and it was a little bit crunchy. I'm like, I wonder if I pushed in too far. Because oftentimes, more than not, my best coyote stands are when I walk the least distance from my truck. And I just think that has to do with impact. I mean, you just get out of your truck, slip in real quiet, and you call. But I'm like, okay, well, let's change it up. So I went to Vol Squeaks, and that started playing, and I kept like turning it down after it played, and it probably played like 3 times, and I turned it down one more time, and it played again. I turned it down one more time, and I looked, and I'm like, holy shit, that's a bobcat. I saw something running through the timber. So the bobcat came running in. Not typical. Everything that I've heard about bobcat hunting is like they come in real slow and sneak in there. I see them all. It actually came running in and he came to the edge of the timber, stopped. And I was like, holy crap. And he was about 220 yards there, which I'm pretty comfortable with my 204. And so it's standing on all fours watching me. And I just left the collar playing. And all of a sudden, he just took about 10 more steps. And then he sat down. I was like, okay. So he's about 210 ish. And sat there in what felt like forever. I mean, it felt like days. And it was probably close to 5 or 6 minutes. And the sequence stopped. And he stood up. And I was like, okay. So I paused it. And he stood up. And you could tell that he was watching and he's looking. And I turned it back on, and boom, here he comes. He walked about, I don't know, probably another 30 yards, stopped. And now he's like, I can see his entire body because beforehand I could just see like his upper part. And so he's just literally locked on to like the collar. I'm a little bit offset of the collar. I've manipulated where the collar would be for a wind advantage. And then that being said, this bobcat never once tried to get downwind. Like foxes and coyotes, every time I've called those, they will always work to get downwind. Whether it's 30 yards downwind or 400 yards downwind, they're always going to work to try to get downwind of that noise to investigate. It wasn't the case for the cat. The cat was using 100% all eyes. So I'm sitting in my chair. I got my gun tucked in my shoulder. And I know, like, well, first when he came out, I knew, like, okay, I can hold straight to, no bullet drop. Again, just because of the cartridge I'm shooting, it's so fast, so flat. And I kept letting it play. And then so he stood up again and he made his final push, I would say. So, who knows? There's about another 30 or 40 yards that he walked. And now he's like probably 10 yards on the outside of the timber. And he's just sitting right on his butt. And he sat there for, boy, I don't know, probably 3 more sequences. And I bet the sequence takes 2.5, 3 minutes to play. And so again, I have very little experience calling bobcats, and I've never called one in. And so I'm like, man, this is a good opportunity. I'm like, I don't know how they bug out. Like if he finally just gets bored and walks away and gives me an opportunity, or does he just get up and trot away? And then I'm like, you're an idiot. Why didn't you take the shot? And, in my mind, I was thinking about all these iconic videos that you see where these guys are shooting bobcats that are literally standing there, like tipping their head 2 feet from the collar, looking at it. But I steadied up. I kind of pulled my knees in to where my elbow, my right elbow was on my right knee, leg, I should say thigh. And then I always like to use my left hand and brace it right underneath my stock. And it makes me feel really comfortable because I'm tight, like I'm pulling my shoulders together. And it allows me to really stabilize my upper body. So that was there. I'm in my like yoked position, I suppose, if you will, where my elbow on my right hand, my trigger arm is tucked tight in. I've got my left arm bracing across my body, and I just slipped my thumb up, hit that safety. And again, he's sitting there completely on his butt, pretty much facing me. I mean, he's maybe looking 5 to 6 degrees off of me. Put it right on his chest, did the exhale, boom, shot. And then all I could see is just like him, like take a big boom, like a little thud, and then he fell directly over. His back legs were tight and locked up, and I just absolutely smoked him. I'm impressed with the shot because I couldn't have walked up and like literally put a dot on that cat better from where I wanted to shoot him. And so I was pumped immediately. I mean, went over there and like was just enamored. He's a male, big, healthy, perfect fur. And so that bullet went dead center, like had to hit right dead center of his sternum, and didn't exit. And it just made just the tiniest little prick on his fur. I mean, to the point that he was barely bleeding when I was like holding him and looking at him. Absolutely perfect. Couldn't have asked for a better type of kill for a bobcat to be able to get mounted or just to skin out and fur up. So that happened. And then I had to go through the process, which again, I was unaware of the process, because I've never shot one. So bobcats you need to use a CITES tag, CITIES, spelled like cities, but I believe it's pronounced CITES. And it doesn't matter what your regulation is. So like in Illinois, in our home state, my home state, you have to draw a permit to be able to harvest one. Where, like in Missouri and Nebraska and in places of Iowa and out in Colorado, there's no limit. You just have to have your fur bearer's license. But that being said, you still need to get a CITES tag for each one that you harvest. That's if you want to take it to a tannery or take it to a taxidermist. And I believe it's a federal program just so they can track how many are harvested. And they ask you, again, I believe, the same sequence of questions. So then that tag goes under the upper lip and through the eye. And I had to take it to a conservation office, and luckily there was a conservation officer close because typically they're closed on Saturdays, which that would have been a bummer to drive all the way home and then all the way back, which technically is legal. Again, in Missouri and other states, you can possess as many as you want. Just I think it was with Missouri, it has to be tagged and registered before 2 days after the trapping season or fur bearer season, I believe. But again, all new, learning all this stuff, still on cloud nine. So got it tagged, got it over to Wayne, and now I need to figure out what I'm going to do with it. But I'm definitely 100% going to mount it. Ended up weighing it when I checked it in. Not a requirement, but the guy was like, "Man, he's a nice cat. Do you care if we weigh him?" Which the guy that helped me, the CO, was really, really nice in Missouri. We ended up weighing 26.6 pounds. It was around 150, 55-ish yard shot. And tagged, bagged, and at the taxidermist. So getting into the spring cleanup stuff here, let's talk about like your hunting gear. So we're in mid-February now. Deer season's over. And now it's going to feel like eternity until next season rolls around, right? Sorry, had to take a drink of this nectar. Couple things that I've done in the past that have bit me in the ass that I wanted to share with you guys is batteries. Especially if you have anything with alkaline batteries in them, it can really ruin your freaking day when you go to pull that thing out and the batteries have leaked. So one thing that I always do, even if it shows 70% battery life, like I always take my batteries out of my trail cameras, even like I said, if they look like they're in full juice, because I've had it time and time again where you put them away for storage and then you pull them out, say in July when you want to start getting velvet pictures, and something happened and you got battery acid all over your camera and either ruins it or it's a pain in the ass. Another one to think about is flashlights and headlamps. So like those are things too that don't necessarily always have a lithium battery. Make sure you pop those out. I mean, if you think they're still good batteries, just put a rubber band around them and leave them in your tote, your bag, or your whatever, but just take them out of that so that you're not having that connection, that connectivity, and you're going to have anything leach and leak acid. Next is check your stands. I'm a take your stand down every year kind of guy. I know it's a little bit extra work, but it's added longevity to my stands and it's become safer. Whether you are or not, now's a good time just to make sure that you give them a once over, especially if you're going to be out there doing some scouting, maybe doing some TSI work or some shed hunting. If you walk by one of those stands you have permanent, check your straps, check the bolts, check the seat, and check your welds. Like those are the 4 areas where you're going to have issues and problems. And, heaven forbid anybody ever does have a stand or a ladder failure that causes an injury. So just take the time to check them over. When you take them down, if you take them down, it's a perfect opportunity to look them over. Cleaning your guns, right? Sounds silly, but I have helped several friends that have neglected their muzzle loaders. And coincidentally, it's probably been more so where they didn't use it. They didn't shoot it. They had a muzzleloader tag, but they did not end up filling it. They left that load in there. And then it's like a nightmare to freaking get their breech plug out and to get that thing cleaned. So I'm going to emphasize on muzzleloaders. If you got a muzzleloader, make sure you break it down. Make sure you clean it. And one thing that I do with my muzzleloader is that after I get it cleaned and it's all prettied up, you got it washed out, the bore's cleaned, your breech plug's cleaned, everything's good to go, I leave my breech plug out of my gun until next season. I don't put it in there. I don't give it an opportunity to rust or seize. Even if you use like the anti-seize or the lube, there's all kinds of products out there. I just leave it out. And it really has helped with me never having to have any issues of me putting vice grips on it or clamps or standing on it with a freaking impact, none of that stuff. I've heard all the horror stories. I've helped people that have had issues with them, but just by leaving that breech plug out in the off season, it helps a ton. Bow work, right? So you're archers or some degree, I'm sure you listen to this hunt cast here. A couple simple things that you can do. First is wax your strings. It's something that's going to add longevity to your bow, and your strings takes almost no time. If you don't have bow wax, it's incredibly cheap. And I use it for other things too. I don't just use it for like just my bow only. The other thing that you can check is check your limb pockets. Make sure the spacing is the same. Sometimes you don't realize that maybe you'll have a little bit of sag or creep, but I always bury my limb pockets. That way I get the most efficiency out of my bow. But just check them. You should have even gaps between your top and bottom limbs on your limb pocket. You can check for cam lean. Depending on your manufacturer, your bow, it's pretty easy to be able to do this. And once you've done it a couple times, or if you have a bow tech that can show you how to look for it, it'll help to make sure that, man, I did bang my bow against a tree a little bit, and maybe it still shoots, but it could have some cam lean that you need to get fixed. And lastly, if you really want to take it to the next level, especially before you start shooting again this summer, is just check it on paper. Throw a couple arrows through paper, see how you're tearing paper, make sure that your bow is in tune right, and you'll be laughing and on to things. Next on my little spring cleanup bullshit session here is shed season. So speaking of shed season, I know guys have already started looking, and there's never really a right or a wrong answer to when to look. I always try to start looking around the Valentine's Day mark, and typically the weekend after. I know that a lot of guys are worried about people poaching their sheds, and man, I've got a guy on Facebook, Austin Vincent, who's fighting guys who are literally trespassing at night and shed hunting. Like, that's a whole nother level of ass hattery. Guy is literally walking past his trail camera with a shed at night with a face mask or a neck gaiter that's pulled up over his face. Like, so he not only does he know he's trespassing, completely knows he's at night, and he's doing it to the point where he's even wearing a neck gaiter at night because he doesn't know where the trail cameras are. So I hope that guy gets caught, but I guess what I'm saying is that a lot of the places that I hunt, I really don't have an issue with that. Or there's some that we do, but other places we don't. And I'd rather wait a little bit longer to give those bucks maybe just one more week to drop before I hit them. So I'll probably start looking the following weekend after this podcast is hit. So like the weekend of the 18th. I would say right now that I'm at about 50% drop based on my trail cameras and then just taking some late night evening drives, especially with the thermal. I've got a thermal scanner, and man, how cool has that been to be able to check fields, even just to see percentage drop in the area. Maybe it's not a field that I can hunt or shed hunt, but when you get into some of these nicer units, it's crazy that you can see their antlers at night. And obviously when they're attached to their head, it will not work for shed hunting because once it falls off their head, they're going to be colder. But it's been a cool tool to use to see, okay, where's the winter herd at? And man, it just, they glow like ants out there. Lastly is I do have some guests lined up for shed season tips and tricks. There's some guys and some buddies of mine that just, they find tons and tons and tons and tons of sheds, and we're going to get them on and do some, bush light burp, talking about finding antlers. Turkey season. Man, I love turkey hunting. I love all hunting, but just turkey hunting is so much fun. I got bit by the bug hard probably 10 years ago, and I've never let go. And one thing to think about is tags. So if you're in Illinois, I think you have a little bit of time left in the third lottery. In fact, I know you do. I think it's the 18th is when you can apply last. And then we have our over-the-counter tags. So if you haven't put in for your tags yet, no matter what state you're in, make sure you get those put in so you can at least draw one. Something else to think about, and I believe this has gotten quite a bit better, but is shot shells. Usually you don't need a whole pile of them, and I know for a couple of years there, ammo shortages were hard and tough. Maybe it's a good time to think about buying one of those boxes of shot shells that you're going to be using, those turkey loads, just to make sure that you got them, you don't got to worry about it. And then lastly is now's a good time to think about, okay, what did I wish I had last year? So decoys, blinds, turkey vest, calls, stuff like that. It's a good time to write that down, make a note of it, because you have an opportunity to get it ahead of time and not behind the eight ball, or to budget for it. Some decoys can get ridiculously expensive. And if you plan for it, it makes it a lot more manageable. So let's talk about me. Who wants to talk about me? Probably nobody wants to talk about me. But I do have some cool things coming up this year if you're going to be keeping tabs with Last Breath and with my personal social media. Here in March, coming up in about probably 6 weeks, I'll be leaving for Texas with Wayne and some other buddies down there. We've got a 4 by 6 mile section that we have leased, and we're going to be able to hunt unlimited hogs, predators, coons, and javelinas down there. And I'm looking forward to it. Wayne makes it sound like it's quite the goat roping, which just makes it all the better. But it'll be a good time. I love hunting Texas. Love the freedom that you have when you're down there hunting Texas. But it's going to be one of those trips where literally everything's a trophy, quote unquote. I don't care if that hog is 12 pounds or 250. I'm killing it. And same thing with coyotes. I don't care if that coyote looked like it's covered in mange or it's the best furred up coyote Texas has got. I'm killing it. Something new that I'll be doing is we'll be catching rattlesnakes. So that'll be something. But I'll be filming all that and documenting all that, and I'll put out a little mini episode when I get done, and we'll see how that turns out. Looking into the fall, then, I'll be actually going to Colorado. I'm going to be doing some early season mule deer hunting. And if it works out, I will be killing a velvet muley. So I'll be taking my bow. I'm going to be starting to put some serious time in behind my Matthews and really making sure that I'm ready. I'm going to have to make sure to not only get ready behind the bow, but in physical condition. We'll be hunting high country mule deer. Pretty stoked about that. I'm surprised that I'm doing it in the sense that, like, I've always said that when I go out west or when I go out of state hunting, I'm going to take a rifle, just because I've done it before with a bow, and I'm like, man, really wish I had a rifle right now. But given the opportunity of early season and hunting these deer when they're pretty methodical, I think it'll give me an advantage with the bow. So we'll see. I'll be out there struggling with archery equipment, and hopefully I get lucky. And then speaking of rifle, and this one isn't completely set in stone yet, but I believe I'll be going antelope hunting in October with a rifle. And more details on that to come. We got to do a couple things here to work out some details, but I would love to be able to do that. It's always a ton of fun. If you guys are looking for a pretty economical hunt with an extremely high success rate, not just opportunity rate, success rate, rifle antelope hunting is just a great time. And depending on where you go, you're going to have absolutely quality animals and absolutely a blast. So I got to inject and say Sandy Hills is the only place that I would look at. I've hunted with other outfitters that have been fantastic, but the experience that we've had when we go out to Sandy Hills and other people when they go there has just been unanimously amazing. And lastly, in late season, is going to be in Nebraska late season mule deer hunt. Mule deer, whitetail, I won't be picky, but it's going to be with the muzzleloader. So I've built that CVA to be able to shoot a long ways. The furthest I've shot it is about 420 yards and smacked a 6-inch gong, or an 8-inch gong. It was an 8-inch gong at 420 yards. So that gun can probably shoot better than I can. And if I get lucky enough to get within several hundred yards of a nice deer this winter out there, that'll be another cool thing to check off the box. So I know this one has been shorter than normal, and I know this podcast has been, it's boring, it's just me. But I wanted to do this just to kind of bullshit fill you in on some stuff that I had on my mind, what I've got coming up. And I guess speaking of that too, I've got some pretty easy goals that I have for this upcoming 23 season. The first one is to have fun, period, right? Like, yeah, that's a goal for everybody, but last year, dude, the camera just snake bit me so bad on the Ziegler, which I'm hoping I find his sheds and I don't find him deaded. I'll start looking for him, like I said, probably around the 18th. I got pictures of him on like November 17th, November 22nd, and then another two pictures of him on November 29th. So he survived our first Illinois gun season, and he survived from when I tagged him in the shoulder in early November. But I don't know if, infection ever caught up to him or if somebody else, another hunter, harvested him later in the year, because I haven't got any photos of him yet. I did have an early shed buck on that farm, which, given the fact that I did hit him, that could be him. So that would be great. But I want to make sure I'm going to still be filming. I want to do that, and I need to figure out a way to do that to where it's still really enjoyable. So I'm probably going to change like the rigging and the system that I'm using. I'm going to try to make it a little more user friendly, a little more error friendly, and get back to doing what I freaking love. And then lastly is just I'm going to kill tons of shit. Like this coyote season, last night was number 39 when I went out hunting with Wayne for coyotes. Well, coyotes with my bobcat, and I killed a couple foxes too. But that's lumped in everything there, mostly coyotes. And I'm just going to hopefully whack and stack some stuff in Texas. And, just this season is going to be one where I'm trying to stack stuff up. I had a fantastic trapping season this year, and I'm keeping on and doing what I absolutely enjoy, and that's hunting, fishing. Trapping is something that I'm not really great at, but I'm getting better, and I'm just gonna keep doing it, dude. So I do have some plans to put out some more informational stuff, like my skinning videos. I've done some skinning time lapses, and a couple of people ask me what I'm using to pull the tail off. So I've got a tail puller that my grandpa got me a long time ago, like little things like that, maybe that somebody doesn't know about. I'm going to try to do more of that and share more of that with you guys. But those are my goals. This podcast probably is a dud, but if you stuck around and listened to me yak my mind out today, I appreciate it. I promise I got some badass guests lined up coming up. And as always, don't waste it. Appreciate you guys being here.